I attended a university in Pennsylvania and spent most evenings inside the campus library. The building stayed open until 2 a.m., which made it perfect during exam season. Like a lot of students, I practically lived there. My favorite study area sat on the 4th floor. The level contained older academic texts that very few people used. Most students stayed on the lower floors. The 4th floor remained almost empty. Exactly the way I liked it. One evening I needed a particular history book for a research paper. The catalog showed it available. The shelf location appeared correct. Yet when I arrived, the book was missing. No big deal. Someone probably checked it out. I asked the front desk. According to the system, the book remained inside the building. Strange, but not alarming. The following evening, the book had returned. Exactly where it belonged. Problem solved. Or so I thought. Several days later, another book disappeared. Then another. Then another. Each time, the library system showed the books available. Yet the shelves sat empty. Then days later, the books would reappear. Always in their proper places. The pattern became impossible to ignore. Eventually, curiosity got the better of me. I started paying attention, taking photographs, recording shelf locations, trying to understand what was happening. Then I noticed something. The missing books always came from the same section, the exact section where I studied. My stomach tightened slightly, because now it felt less random. Still, there were plenty of innocent explanations, until I found the note. The note sat inside one of the books, folded between 2 pages. At first I assumed it belonged to another student. Then I unfolded it. The paper contained a single sentence. "You always sit by the window." My blood immediately ran cold. Because it was true. Every evening. Same table. Same chair. Same window. For several seconds, I just stared at the note, trying to convince myself it wasn't meant for me. But deep down I knew it was. I threw the paper away. Told myself it was a prank. Nothing more. Then another note appeared. A week later. Different book. Same handwriting. "You were late tonight." That sentence genuinely frightened me. Because I had arrived later than usual. Nearly an hour later. Meaning whoever wrote the note noticed. And apparently paid attention. The realization changed everything. I stopped using the same table. Changed floors. Changed schedules. The notes adapted immediately. Within days, another appeared. Nice try. My stomach dropped. Because now it was obvious. Someone wasn't merely noticing me. Someone was watching me. The situation escalated quickly after that. One evening around midnight, I left my study area to grab coffee. The floor was almost empty. Only a few students remained. Nothing unusual. Then I noticed a man standing between shelves. Watching. Not reading. Not browsing. Watching. The moment our eyes met, he turned away and disappeared behind a row of books. I immediately followed. The aisle was empty. Completely empty. No footsteps. No movement. Nothing. The encounter lasted only seconds. Yet it bothered me for days. Eventually I reported everything to campus security. The notes. The missing books. The man. Everything. Security reviewed footage. And what they discovered surprised everyone. Several cameras repeatedly captured the same individual, moving through rarely used sections of the library. Always after dark. Always near the 4th floor. Always near my study area. The person never interacted with staff. Never checked out books. Never used study rooms. Just wandered. Observed. Waited. The investigation expanded. Eventually staff discovered a hidden collection of notebooks inside a rarely used archive area. The notebooks contained observations, descriptions of students, schedules, habits, study locations, dozens of names, including mine, weeks of entries. The level of detail felt disturbing. The individual responsible was eventually identified and removed from campus. Thankfully. But one detail still bothers me. Because among the notes about me appeared a sentence dated before I ever noticed the missing books. It read, "He likes the quiet floors," meaning, whoever was watching had noticed me long before I noticed them. The first time I saw her, I assumed she was a librarian. The second time, I realized she wasn't. By the third time, I started checking the archive room before locking up. Because somehow, every night after closing, she appeared inside a section of the library that nobody should have been able to enter. This happened in 2021. At the time, I worked evenings at a large public library in Ohio. I wasn't a librarian. I handled closing duties, shelving returns, organizing study rooms, locking certain sections of the building before staff left for the night. It wasn't a difficult job. Most evenings followed the same routine. The library closed at 9 p.m. Visitors left. Staff finished paperwork. Then everyone went home. Simple, predictable, until the archive room. The archive section occupied part of the basement. Unlike the main library, it wasn't open to the public. Access required staff approval. The room stored local records, historical newspapers, and rare materials. Nothing particularly exciting. Just old documents. Because of its location, the archive room was usually one of the last areas checked before closing, which is why I noticed her. The first sighting happened around 8:45 p.m. I was returning a cart of materials when I glanced through the archive room window. A woman sat at one of the tables, reading. Nothing unusual, at least initially. I assumed another employee had approved access. Simple explanation. When I mentioned her to the archivist, however, the archivist looked confused. According to records, nobody had reserved the room that evening. The explanation still seemed simple. Maybe paperwork wasn't updated. Maybe someone forgot to log a visitor. No big deal. The following night, however, I saw her again. Same table, same seat, same dark coat. Again around 8:45 p.m. This time I informed staff immediately. A librarian entered the archive room to check. The room was empty. Completely empty. The librarian searched every aisle, every storage section. Nothing. I remember feeling embarrassed. Maybe I'd seen someone through a reflection. Maybe fatigue. Maybe anything. Still, I knew what I'd seen. The third sighting happened 3 nights later. This time I was prepared. At exactly 8:40 p.m., I positioned myself near the archive hallway. 5 minutes later, she appeared. Not entering. Not walking through the door. Just there, sitting at the table, reading. My stomach tightened immediately, because I knew nobody had entered. I'd been watching the hallway the entire time. The archive room had only one public entrance. Yet somehow the woman was already inside. I immediately opened the door. The room looked empty. No woman. No movement. Nothing. The chair where she'd been sitting remained pushed under the table. Perfectly still. For several seconds, I simply stood there, trying to understand what had happened. Then I noticed something. An old newspaper lying open on the table. The paper hadn't been there earlier. The date printed across the top immediately caught my attention. The newspaper was part of the archive collection, a document stored inside secured cabinets. Yet somehow it sat open on the table. That detail genuinely bothered me, because someone had accessed it. Someone. Over the next several weeks, the sightings continued. Always around the same time. Always inside the archive room. Always seated at the same table. The pattern became impossible to ignore. Even other staff members started noticing unusual things. Books appearing on tables. Archive drawers left open. Documents moved. Nothing major. Just enough to suggest somebody had been using the room. Eventually security became involved. Cameras were installed. Additional monitoring began. Everything seemed reasonable. Until the footage came back. Because the recordings showed something strange. The archive room remained empty most nights. Completely empty. Then occasionally, a chair would move. Slightly. Not dramatically. Just enough to be noticeable. No visible person. No explanation. Just movement. The footage unsettled everyone. Not because it proved anything supernatural. Because it proved something was happening. Something nobody could explain. Then came the incident that finally ended the mystery. One evening, shortly before closing, a maintenance worker discovered a hidden access door. The door sat behind shelving in a storage area connected to the archive room. Most staff didn't even know it existed. The passage led into an older section of the building no longer used by the public. And inside, they found evidence someone had been staying there. Blankets, food containers, flashlights, everything necessary for long-term occupation. My stomach dropped immediately, because suddenly the situation made sense. Someone had access. Someone had a place to hide. Someone could enter the archive room without using normal entrances. The discovery shocked everyone. Investigators eventually determined a former contractor had been using portions of the abandoned maintenance area for months, possibly longer. The individual disappeared before authorities arrived, but the archive disturbances stopped immediately afterward. The woman never appeared again, at least officially. Years later, one detail still bothers me, because investigators reviewed old security reports. Several employees had described seeing a woman in the archive room long before the hidden passage was discovered. Same table, same chair, same description. For years. Maybe everyone saw the same person. Maybe rumors influenced memories. Maybe there was a simple explanation. But I still remember that newspaper, because when archivists checked records afterward, the 1987 edition I found on the table wasn't missing. It had never left the locked cabinet. This happened in 2020. I worked as a night supervisor at a large university library in the Midwest. The building was enormous. 6 floors, hundreds of thousands of books, study rooms, archive sections, storage areas, and countless rows of shelves. Students loved the place because it stayed open until 3 a.m. during exam periods. For the most part, the job was simple. Monitor the floors, help students, lock restricted areas, go home. Nothing unusual, at least initially. The first strange thing happened during finals week. Around 1 a.m., I discovered a disposable coffee cup sitting on a shelf deep inside the stacks. Normally, that wouldn't matter. Students leave trash everywhere. The strange part was the location. The shelf sat inside a section closed to the public. Access required a staff key. Students couldn't get there. At least they weren't supposed to. I threw the cup away and forgot about it. A few nights later, I found another one. Different location. Same restricted area. Then another. Then food wrappers. Then water bottles. The pattern became difficult to ignore. Someone was spending time where they shouldn't. The obvious explanation was another employee. Still, something felt off, because the items kept appearing in places people rarely visited. Hidden places. Out-of-the-way places. Almost like someone wanted them to remain undiscovered. The situation escalated when I found the blanket, folded neatly behind a row of shelves. My stomach tightened immediately, because nobody accidentally leaves a blanket inside a restricted library section. Nobody. I reported the discovery. Management assumed a student somehow gained access. Security performed additional patrols. Nothing changed. In fact, the signs increased. More food wrappers, more bottles, more evidence. Eventually I started paying closer attention. And that's when I noticed the noises. Small noises. Subtle noises. Late at night. A shelf creaking. A distant footstep. A cart moving. The sounds always seemed to come from empty areas. Areas where nobody should have been. One night around 2 a.m., I decided to investigate. The noise originated from the 5th floor. One of the quietest sections in the building. I remember walking between the shelves with a flashlight. Everything looked normal. Silent. Empty. Then I turned a corner and saw movement. Just a glimpse. A figure disappearing behind a shelf. My heart immediately started pounding. I called out. No response. I followed. The aisle beyond was empty. Completely empty. No footsteps. No sounds. Nothing. The encounter lasted only seconds. But it confirmed my suspicion. Someone was there. The following week, security cameras were reviewed more thoroughly. And finally, something appeared. Several recordings showed an unidentified person moving through restricted areas after closing. Always late at night. Always avoiding cameras. Always disappearing before security arrived. The footage was frustrating. No clear face. No identification. Nothing useful. Yet it proved one thing. The person existed. Very real. Very present. The investigation expanded. Then one evening, I made a discovery that genuinely terrified me. Behind a rarely used shelf section, I noticed a narrow gap in the wall. The opening wasn't obvious. Most people would never notice it. Curiosity got the better of me. I squeezed through, and immediately stopped. Because beyond the shelves sat a hidden space. Not a room exactly. More like an unused maintenance area. Large enough for a person to live comfortably. And someone had. My stomach dropped. Blankets. Food. Water. Batteries. Flashlights. Books. everything necessary for long-term occupancy. The area looked organized, permanent, like somebody had been living there for months, possibly years. Then I found the notebooks. Several notebooks stacked neatly beside a mattress. The contents made my blood run cold, because they weren't journals. They were observations, descriptions of students, descriptions of staff, schedules, habits, routines, page after page, hundreds of entries, including mine. When I arrived, when I left, what floors I checked first, everything. The realization hit me immediately. Whoever lived there wasn't merely hiding. They were watching. Everyone. Security was contacted immediately. Police arrived. The hidden area became a crime scene. Investigators collected evidence, reviewed footage, examined records. Eventually they identified a suspect. A former student who had once worked in the building years earlier. Someone familiar with maintenance access points. Someone familiar with restricted areas. Someone who understood how to remain unnoticed. The individual disappeared before authorities located him. But the hidden living area was cleared. The entrances were sealed. And the strange incident stopped, at least mostly, because one detail still bothers me. Among all the notebooks, investigators found a final entry. A short one, written only days before the hidden space was discovered. The entry referred to me, and it said, "He's getting curious." The sentence still gives me chills, because while I believed I was slowly uncovering the mystery, whoever lived there had apparently been watching my investigation the entire time. Every discovery, every patrol, every question, nothing surprised them. They saw it all coming, and somehow, that realization is scarier than finding the hidden room itself.